So the altar of sacrifice is going to be the focus of this video. And we see sacrifices way before Moses and the Israelites started sacrificing animals in the tabernacle that Moses built in Exodus. Sacrifices actually go all the way back to the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve first sinned. The first sacrifice was in Genesis chapter 3, where God clothed Adam and Eve with animal skin. See, before they sinned, they were clothed with Christ's righteousness, which means they didn't need clothing because their bodies were bodies of light. You couldn't see their nakedness. Now, God is a consuming fire. So when Adam and Eve were clothed in God's righteousness, they could stand in his presence and not burn up. And after they sinned, they realized they were naked, and Adam was hiding from God when God came looking for him. Why was Adam hiding? He was afraid of the Lord's fire. He didn't have on the robe of Christ's righteousness. Now, we also see sacrifices in Genesis chapter 4 when Cain offered fruit from the ground, which was not honored by God, and Abel offered the firstborn of their animal flock. We also see in the book of Genesis that God commanded Noah to take 7 pairs of every clean animal onto the ark for sacrifice and for food. Then in Genesis chapter 8, verse 20, Noah builds an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Then in Genesis chapter 22, God tells Abraham to take his son, his only son, Isaac, whom he loved, and go to the land of Moriah and have him offer his son as a burnt offering. Now, did God actually have Abraham go through it? No. God was telling Abraham to do this to show his faith. Now, he wasn't telling Abraham, show me your faith and do this. He was just wanted to see Abraham's faith. And it was more for Abraham. It wasn't for God knows the beginning from the end. So this wasn't for God to know. It was for Abraham to demonstrate his faith. Faith is important to God. And it should be important to us. The Bible tells us without faith that we can't please God. So what was the point of all these sacrifices? They were all done in faith that God would send the Messiah as a sacrifice for our sins. The altar is also a representation of the birth of Christ, as he was born in a stable amongst animals. Animals represent sacrifice. What did John say when he saw Jesus? He said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. That's John chapter 1, verse 29. Also, Christ was born without blemishes, just as the sacrificed animals were required to be without blemishes. Now, the outside of the sanctuary that Moses built was not appealing to look at from the outside, but it was absolutely beautiful on the inside. The Bible tells us that Christ was not born attractive, that people would desire him, but inside of him was the very presence of God. Do you see the parallel between the outside of the sanctuary and the outside of Christ, and the inside of the sanctuary and the inside of Christ? It's also important to understand that the altar of sacrifice is just step one. Your salvation is not finished at the cross. The price was paid at the cross, but your salvation depends on you following Christ. Christ's sacrifice made it possible for you to have eternal life. Anyone who preaches that Christ paid the price and you're saved right now, all you have to do is accept and do nothing else, is giving you direction that is going to get you lost. God gave us this map, this blueprint, so we can follow him through the sanctuary and not get lost. If you believe that all you have to do is accept his sacrifice and do nothing else, then you don't believe Jesus' own teachings. Or maybe it's just a lack of understanding. But if you follow the blueprint of the sanctuary, you're not going to get lost. Let's look at one of those verses in regards to the altar of sacrifice. It says that if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's Romans chapter 10, verse 9. Now, confessing here means to manifest, to reveal Christ's character. So, to reveal Christ's character, you must have Christ's character abiding in you. You can't show the character of Christ if you don't have the character of Christ. If you believe that to be saved, all you have to do is say that Christ is your Savior and believe it, without manifesting his character, then you should pay closer attention to his teachings. I'm going to read Matthew chapter 10, verses 32 and 33, and then verses 37 to 39, so you can have a better understanding. It says, "Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross," and pay attention, "and he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it." He says you have to take your cross and follow after him. And if you don't love him with all of your heart, all your mind, all your soul, if you love your relatives, your sons, your daughters, your mother or father, more than you love him, that you're not worthy of him. So it's more than just accepting his sacrifice at the cross. Please understand that God is your creator. He loves you so much that he sent his son to die for you. Understand that Jesus loves you so much that he died the most excruciating death imaginable, carrying the sins from the entire world that caused him to sweat blood. And that's an actual medical condition. It's called hematidrosis. Now, there's not much information available on that medical condition because it's very rare and it's not clearly understood, but medical experts say that hematidrosis generally happens when a person feels intense fear or stress. Now, in the case of Jesus, he literally died from a broken heart. So how do we manifest Jesus' character? How do we confess with our mouth that he is Lord? Follow him through the sanctuary. After the altar of sacrifice, which is your acceptance and your repentance, you come to the laver, which represents baptism. Let's look at what the Bible says about the laver. Jesus answered and said to him, "Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born again," which is baptized, "he cannot see the kingdom of God." Nicodemus said to him, "How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born?" Jesus said, "Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born of the water and spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God." John chapter 3, verses 3 to 5. So we started out at the altar of sacrifice. We walked directly to the laver. We got baptized. What next? Directly in front of us is the entrance to the sanctuary. Once we enter the sanctuary, we are in the holy place. Now, to our right is a table of showbread. What does the Bible say about the table of showbread? It says, "But he answered him and said, It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God." Matthew chapter 4, verse 4. Is your church living by, and are you living by, every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God? Is that in their doctrines? So now that we're reading God's word every day and studying the scriptures so that we can live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God, what else do we have to do? Directly in front of us is the altar of incense. This represents our prayers. What does the Bible tell us about the altar of incense? Well, Luke chapter 18, verses 1 to 14 tell us to pray constantly. We should be in communion with God continuously. How often do you talk to your wife or your husband? God deserves even more. We should be in constant prayer with our God. So, we've been reading God's word daily. We've been praying to God every day. What does this map tell us to do next? To our left, we have the 7-branch candlesticks. What does the Bible say about the 7-branch candlesticks? It says, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 to 16. We are to let our light shine and spread God's word. The 7-branch candlesticks represents us ministering to others. So far we've accepted Christ's sacrifice. We've repented. We've been baptized. We've been reading God's word daily. We've been praying to God every day. We've been in communion with him constantly. We've been teaching others about his word, letting our light shine. At this point, we're on fire for the Lord, right? We're getting to know Christ better every single day. And every day we fall more in love with him. And that love leads us into the most holy place where we're in the very throne room of God. Every day you give up your will to him to do his will. Every part of you that you give up through his power that was poured out was replaced and refilled by him. And eventually there's no more of you left, and you are now a vessel for Christ. You are completely full of the Holy Spirit. You love him with your whole heart, your whole soul, your whole mind, and that love leads you to obey his law. And the most holy place is the Ark of the Covenant, containing the 10 Commandments. If you love me, obey my commandments. John chapter 14, verse 15. Understand this map of salvation. God puts this map on everything. The Israelites, when they left Egypt, they walked the path of the sanctuary. They didn't do it faithfully, but they walked it. What were they told to do before they left Egypt? Think of the Passover, Exodus chapter 12. They sacrificed lambs. We're at the altar of sacrifice. Next, they walked through the Red Sea, where God parts the Red Sea, and they walked through it. This represents baptism. It's Exodus chapter 14. We're at the laver. Next, it rains down manna. This is Exodus chapter 16. We're at the table of showbread. Next, God tells them they're going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That's the 7 branch candlesticks. They're witnessing. Now, what happens next in Exodus chapter 19? God tells them to take 3 days for heart preparation to prepare to meet God. They're at the heart of the sanctuary, the altar of incense. What do you do to prepare? You pray. Now, what's the very thing that happens next? Exodus chapter 20, God gives the 10 Commandments, which brings us into the most holy place with the Ark of the Covenant. Now, what about the New Testament itself? Altar of sacrifice, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're all about the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. The book of Acts is about baptism of the Holy Spirit. Romans to Jude, the importance of the Word of God, intercession and prayer, letting your light shine. Then, Revelation, we're in the throne room of God. We're in the most holy place. Jesus says, I am the way. Jesus is the sanctuary. He says, I am the way. Psalm says, thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. So Jesus is the sanctuary. He's in the sanctuary. Where should you be? Inside the sanctuary. So Moses made a serpent. Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. And so it was, if a serpent had bitten anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. Numbers chapter 21, verse 9. Then in John chapter 3:14, we see this. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. John chapter 3, verse 14. This is a parallel of the sacrifice of Christ and how we are to keep our eye on him. In the 4th book of the Bible, the Israelites had no idea that the serpent on the pole represented keeping your eye on Christ. Those who kept their eye on the pole with the serpent lived, and those who didn't died. This verse tells us at least 2 things. The prophecy of the coming of the Messiah was true, and if we take our eyes off of Jesus, we will die. It's not talking about the first death, it's talking about the second death after the resurrection. Permanently die. There are so many parallels in the Bible that are screaming out, telling us the steps to be saved. Look at this, listen to these parallels. How long were the Israelites in the desert? 40 years, right? How long was Jesus in the wilderness? 40 days. When did he go into the wilderness? After baptism. Just like the Israelites went into the wilderness 40 years after crossing the Red Sea, which represented baptism. What was the first temptation of Christ by Satan? To turn these stones into bread. What happened after the Israelites crossed the Red Sea? It rained down manna. Table of showbread. So let's get this straight. Christ was born, altar of sacrifice. He was baptized, we're at the laver. He was tempted to turn these stones into bread. And what article of furniture are we at now? Number 3, the table of showbread. Jesus took the same steps the Israelites took, except he did it right. He never fell. The sanctuary is throughout the entire Bible. You just have to know what to look for. Did you know that Lucifer is very well acquainted with the sanctuary? The story of the sanctuary actually begins in heaven. There's an angel named Lucifer, and he's described in Ezekiel 28 as a covering cherub. Ezekiel 28 verses 12, 14, and 15. You are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created till iniquity was found in you. Now the Bible defines in 1 John chapter 3 verse 4, iniquity is sin, which is transgression of the law. So to break God's law. So did God have a law in heaven? Absolutely. Before the earth was created, God had a law in heaven, and Satan broke that law. Let's take a look at the job description of a covering cherub so we can see what Lucifer's job description was in heaven. In the book of Exodus, Moses was instructed to build a sanctuary so that God could dwell among them. The sanctuary was a shadow of the heavenly sanctuary, that is to say, a miniature-sized replica of God's heavenly sanctuary, the sanctuary in heaven. Moses is told to build the sanctuary exactly as God has instructed him to do so. So Moses has this blueprint of this earthly sanctuary, which inside contains a holy place separated by a veil into the most holy place. And the most holy place is God's throne room in heaven. It contains the mercy seat, and under the mercy seat is the Ark of the Covenant with the Ten Commandments written by the finger of God. Now, let's read about the throne room and then the job description of Lucifer as a covering cherub. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold of hammered work. You shall make them at 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub at one end, the other cherub at the other end. You shall make the cherubim at the 2 ends of it, one piece with the mercy seat. And the cherubim shall stretch out their wings above, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and they shall face one another. The face of the cherubim shall be towards the mercy seat. You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I will give you. That's the Ten Commandments. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim, which are on the ark of the testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel. That's Exodus chapter 25, verses 17 to 22. So these 2 cherubim are facing one another. They have their wings stretched across the top of the mercy seat, covering it, protecting it. The mercy seat is sitting on top of the Ark of the Covenant. And that sends a very powerful message. It tells us that the foundation of God's throne, his mercy seat, is his law. So what was Lucifer's job description as a covering cherub? It was to protect the law of God. How did Satan sin? Isaiah chapter 14, verse 13 and 14. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the further sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Satan said he was going to be God. And this sin started in his heart. The first sin started inside of the heart of Satan. Revelation chapter 12 tells us the first war was in heaven, and Satan took 1/3 of the angels with him when he was cast out. There are millions upon millions of angels, so how did Satan deceive all of those angels? 1/3. Did he tell them, let's go be wicked and destroy heaven? Of course not. He's way more subtle than that. This was a war over God's law. He was telling them, you don't need God's law to be holy. And the angels were sinning by following Lucifer. They were breaking God's law. Satan convinced 1/3 of the angels they didn't need God's law, that they couldn't keep God's law, that God's law was unfair, the very law that Lucifer was responsible for protecting. So does this sound like a familiar teaching in many churches now? That we don't need God's law at the cross. God understands that we can't keep his law. We're sinners. He abolished his law. The law was fulfilled at the cross, so it doesn't apply anymore. The war between God and Lucifer started over God's law. It's always been about God's law, and it will end with God upholding his law. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. John chapter 15, verse 10. God describes his law as love. They aren't meant to be a burden. Keeping God's law shows God that you love him and your fellow man that you love him too. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. 1 John chapter 5, verse 3. If you love me, keep my commandments, and I will pray the Father, and he will give you another helper, that he may abide with you forever. John chapter 14, verse 15 and 16. And finally, the last book of the Bible, the revelation of Jesus Christ. In the end, God shows us who the saved are, who the righteous are, who are the ones that make it to heaven. Revelation chapter 14, verse 12. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. The next video I'm going to make is going to be about the laver, which represents baptism. Thank you guys for watching. God bless you.